While the Iraq War technically may be over, many Iraqis who helped the United States during that war face retribution for aiding what many Iraqi citizens saw as the enemy. Kirk Johnson was working for USAID in Iraq in 2005. After he returned home, suffering from his own demons, he heard his Iraqi friend's life was in danger. And with that, Kirk Johnson took on a new role. And he joins us now in San Francisco, California. Kirk Johnson, the author of To Be a Friend is Fatal, The Fight to Save the Iraqis America Left Behind. Kirk, it's good of you to be with us tonight on TVO. I want to start by asking how a kid from Illinois is fluent in Arabic, because you were and are. How did that happen?
I had this amazing grandmother who, she never went to college, but she traveled all over the world, and she wanted to bring each of her grandchildren to a different country. And so when I was 15, she brought me to Egypt, and it completely changed my life. As soon as I got back, I was obsessed with trying to learn Arabic and learning about the Middle East, and as soon as I got my driver's license, I started going to night school to learn how to read and write in Arabic, and everything sort of flowed from that original trip.
After George W. Bush announced that he wanted to go to war with Iraq, you started to think, maybe I have a role in this somehow. Tell us what was going through your head.
Well, I was living in Egypt at the time. I was doing research on a Fulbright scholarship, and I was very much opposed to the idea of invading Iraq. I felt that the way that my country was making the case for war, we were losing our closest and longest held allies. But I had a choice. I come from a family that values public service, and also my parents raised me to believe that it's not enough to simply formulate an opinion. If you believe in something, you should act on it. And so for me, even though I was opposed to the war, I felt an obligation on a moral level and on an ethical level to try to help with rebuilding the country. I didn't see how anybody could oppose that, because in my mind I saw it as a way to right a wrong. And so as soon as I finished up my year of research, I started applying for positions to go work on the attempts to rebuild Iraq.
And just that bit about your folks. Your dad was, he was in politics and the military too, I think, was he not?
Yeah, my dad served in Vietnam with the Army. And I grew up sort of in Illinois politics. My dad was in the state legislature for most of my childhood.
Okay, you not only went to Iraq to chip in, you went to Fallujah, which is, well, that's not a safe part of Iraq. Not that there were any safe parts, but that surely was one of the least safe. Why did you want to go there?
Well, you know, I got to Baghdad, to the Green Zone. I was 24 years old. I was the only person working for USAID in Iraq that spoke Arabic. And I'd lived all throughout the Middle East. And I got there with a somewhat naive intention to, I thought I was going there to help rebuild the country, yet all I was doing was sort of this nonsensical paperwork for the agency, and I wasn't getting out into the country. I didn't feel like I was making any impact. And I hadn't gone to Iraq to just hang out at parties in the Green Zone. I wanted to try to do something, and so I started to agitate for a position outside of Baghdad, and in response to that request, they sent me to Fallujah. So I was USAID's first coordinator for the efforts to rebuild that city. And at the time, Fallujah was still the nexus of the insurgency. The US had basically turned 1/3 of the city into rubble, and about 2/3 of the residents of Fallujah were still not even living in the city. But Fallujah had become sort of like the flashpoint for the war, and whoever won Fallujah would win the war, was the way the thinking went. And so I went there, I just had turned 25, and I went there to try to make some sense of what we might be able to do to improve the lives of those living in the city.
Fair to say going to Fallujah messed you up a bit?
You know, I didn't realize it at the time, but what is required of you in a situation like that has to inevitably produce consequences in your thinking. So every day I would ride through town in the back of a Humvee, an open-air sort of military truck, and I would have to be constantly scanning every little bit of trash along the roadside to see if it was concealing a bomb. I would be scanning the tree trunks to see if there were any wires coming up the branches that might be concealing a bomb. I would be studying the amount of clothing that Iraqis were wearing to see if they might be hiding a suicide bomber's vest underneath. You can't ask your brain to do that without it taking a toll. And even though at the time I felt very engaged, I was excited about my work, it was very challenging. But I didn't feel like I had post-traumatic stress or anything. I just felt like this is what I went to Iraq to do, to try to make a difference. It wasn't until I took a vacation at the end of 1 year that I really realized that I was suffering from PTSD.
Well, that's where I want you to pick up the story, because you did in fact go on a vacation to the Dominican Republic, and you know, as much as I know you don't want to relive it, why don't you tell everybody, because you do write about it in the book, what you did there?
Yeah, I'm the guy that takes a vacation from the most dangerous city on the face of the planet to have his near-death experience in the Caribbean. Irony is a pretty meaningless word for me at this point. On the second night of my vacation, I went to the Dominican Republic to meet with my family. And on my second night there, I entered into what's called a dissociative fugue state, which happens to a lot of people returning from a war zone. In essence, it's sleepwalking, but highly functional sleepwalking. And so in my case, in the middle of the night, I got out of my bed, I walked over to my hotel window, I opened up the latch and crawled out onto the ledge. A resort guard at about 4:30 in the morning walked past and saw me and started yelling at me and pointing a flashlight, and he said that I was yelling back at him. I have no recollection of this incident. And as he started to run around to the front of the condo to wake up my family, he heard the thud of my body falling to concrete. And I fell about 18 feet and broke both of my wrists. I broke my jaw, my nose. I cracked my skull in 2 places, and I tore my face up to such an extent that I needed about 70 or 80 stitches to stanch the bleeding. I got myself up and went over to where my parents were staying in the next condo over, and my memory begins shortly thereafter, and it's a pretty unpleasant memory. So in fact, it's a pretty unpleasant year of my life, to be honest, from that point on, because it was basically a year of surgery, a year of fighting off the same 2 or 3 nightmares that would come back to me every night, but also a year of watching the projects that I had initiated in Fallujah unravel in my absence. And I basically felt that I had just completely failed, that I had just risked my life and nearly died, and not a single tiny thing was for the better in Iraq. It had all been completely pointless. And to me, that was the most challenging aspect of all of it, even in some cases more so than the physical injuries.
I'm going to follow up on the Iraq angle on this in a second, but you know, the description in the book of that near-death experience for you is so harrowing, and to look at you now, I mean, I know you've got a little scar on your chin that your beard is partly covering up, but you do not look, you don't look like you've been through a near-death experience. I mean, have you completely recovered?
You can't. Yeah, I'm kind of hoping that your camera isn't zooming in on my dead teeth in the front of my mouth, but
well,
no, I have no, please don't. We'll spare the people of Canada that sight. No, I'm recovered now. I mean, there are some residual effects of just weaker bones and things like that. But, every doctor that I've had has told me that there's no reason I should be alive, much less standing or sentient, given the extent of my injuries. So as unlucky as it was, I also recognize how fortunate I am that it wasn't worse.
Gotcha. Okay, let's get to the nub of the book now, which is you somehow became the point man for many Iraqis who helped the United States in its efforts militarily in Iraq and have subsequently been seen with great suspicion by other Iraqis as somehow aiding and abetting the enemy. How is it that you became that guy that so many people went to say, Kirk, I'm in trouble, they think I'm a traitor, help me get out of Iraq?
I will be completely honest in saying that I had no designs on that role. I had no plan to end up taking on that responsibility. What really happened was that roughly about 1 year after my accident, I had pretty much given up on Iraq. I felt like a defeated person, frankly, and I was trying to move on with life. But I got an email from an Iraqi colleague of mine. We had worked together at USAID, and he had been photographed or identified walking out of the green zone one afternoon after several years of service to the U.S. government. There were militia members that would hang outside of the bases in the green zone with the sole function of trying to target Iraqis helping the Americans in order to kill them. And my friend had evaded them for years, but one afternoon he slipped up and confirmed his identity. And the next morning he walked out and found the severed head of a dog on his front steps with a note saying that if he didn't leave Iraq, that his head would be next. And he raced back to the green zone, back to the U.S. government, and said, "You've got to help me. They're going to kill me. I need protection." And the U.S. government looked at him and they said, "Tough, you're on your own. If you don't sort this out in the next 2 weeks, we're going to have to give your job to somebody else." And so my friend, without any help from his employer, from the United States of America, he and his wife packed everything they could into a couple bags and they fled Iraq to Dubai, where he ducked into an internet cafe and he sent me an email. And he and I had become close in part because I spoke Arabic with him. And I have to say that there was something about receiving that email that was kind of like a light switch moment in my life where I realized I had been spending all this time feeling sorry for myself and feeling frustrated. But I had survived. I was fine in the big scheme of things, and my friend was in a much worse situation. And I thought that maybe if I could just help this one friend, that it wouldn't be a complete failure, that maybe that would all have been worth it. I could have one tiny little success to hold on to. And I was also motivated in part by just anger at my government, that they just shouldn't have treated him this way. I mean, we completely relied on these Iraqis. They did everything from translate for us to bringing us our food, to bringing us tips on where there was insurgent activity. I mean, they were our lifeblood there. And I realized that they were being completely screwed over. And so without going through every twist and turn of the last 7 years of my life, it really started with one opinion piece that I wrote in December of 2006, calling on America to protect these people. And no sooner did that piece run than I started to receive dozens, then hundreds, and then thousands of emails from other Iraqis who, like my friend, were running for their lives because they had worked for the United States.
Well, you also had some
meetings. And in the absence of any...
I'm sorry, I was just going to say, in the efforts, or in your efforts to try to help some of these people, you ended up having some meetings with some fairly high-profile American politicians, such as, for example, Senator Ted Kennedy. You had a private meeting with him. How did that go?
It went quite well, actually. I met with Kennedy more than once and worked with him fairly closely on drafting a piece of legislation that opened up 25,000 visas for these Iraqis who were on the run because of their affiliation with the U.S. And yeah, really, I mean, the last, you know, it's easier to look back and chart some sort of like, this was the strategy. But in reality, the last 7 years of my life have just been a series of trial and error, trying to force the U.S. government to recognize its obligation to these people, and beyond just recognizing it, to actually help them and to bring them to safety.
Now, I'm going to bring another name up here, which for some people who follow American politics carefully up here, Denny Hastert, whom your family knew from Illinois. He became the Speaker of the House. He was actually the favored candidate, I gather, at some point for a seat that your father was looking at running in, and they told your father to stand down. We want this guy instead. You had many meetings with him. Was he helpful?
Well, let's just be honest. No, he wasn't helpful. You know, I think, I mean, there's people can read the book if they want to see the history with Hastert, but the times that I met with him, he was already on his way out, having lost the speakership, and so I think either he didn't really care that much, or he didn't. His power base was rapidly diminishing. I should probably be more polite about speaking about these people, but I've just gotten so tired over the years of sugarcoating things. Some people helped and some people didn't, and you might as well be frank about it.
Agreed. Let's keep it real here. Why not? Let me ask you this. There's that old expression that it's better to let 9 guilty people go free than put 1 innocent person in jail. And I gather your government's had a complete 180 on that, which is it's better that we keep a lot of maybe deserving people from having asylum in the United States rather than letting one trickster get through who could represent a potential terrorist threat to the United States. Do you understand that view at all?
I'm so glad that you asked this, because that is really what I've been wrestling against for most of the last 8 years or so. After 9/11, I think the United States lost its mind in many respects. And what I'm trying to do through this mission is to try to recoup just a little bit of moral clarity in our dealings with the world. You know, if you asked a random Canadian or a random American, should we be letting in large numbers of Iraqis, of Arabs, of Muslims, the knee-jerk assessment will probably be no, or let's be very, very judicious. And nothing that I've talked about over the years proposes short-circuiting any sort of security checks or things like that. But what people need to understand is that these Iraqis who worked for us are the most documented refugees on the face of the planet. The United States government has their eyeballs scanned, their fingerprints scanned. They have to go through polygraph examinations in order to work for us. You don't get to ride alongside U.S. Marines or diplomats without undergoing extensive background checks. And so that, to me, is the obscenity of this whole sort of slow rolling of the process that the U.S. government has been doing over the last several years, is that these are our friends. And all I'm trying to do is get the United States government to make this tiny distinction between our enemies. And I am aware of the fact, having lived in Fallujah, that the United States does have some enemies in the world. I'm not some naive kid anymore. All I'm trying to do is to get us to make a distinction between our enemies and our very close friends who are themselves running from our enemies because they helped us. And if you were to look at the process, at what we make these Iraqis go through before they can come to America, we basically treat them like enemies. We completely rely on them until they need our help, at which point they show up in our system as a potential terrorist, and they have to wait for years. And so our refugee policy, Canada's, by the way, has been much kinder to Iraqis than the United States has been. Our refugee policy is basically, look, if you can live long enough, if you can survive a couple years, then we might think about giving you an interview. And to me, that, you mentioned that better to let 9 guilty people go free. That cuts all the way back to the Bible, that doctrine. And there's actually a word for it. It's called the Blackstone Formulation. The United States Supreme Court references Blackstone every time that it stresses the need to prove innocence beyond, or guilt beyond all reasonable doubt. And so, for some reason, in the last 10 years, we have basically chucked that. And we basically said that it's better to let 1,000 Iraqi interpreters, which my organization estimates that a minimum of 1,000 have already been assassinated because they worked for us. It's better to just let 1,000 of them die rather than potentially let one bad apple in. Even though the odds of letting a bad apple in are so minuscule because we already know who these people are. And if I sound agitated, it's because this really should not be that tough. And America used to be better than this. We didn't treat the Vietnamese who worked for us this way. We didn't treat Iraqis who were allied with us in the late 90s this way. We just put them on airplanes and we flew them to a remote military base. We did screenings for a month or two and then we brought them to the United States. It's only now that we suddenly, we've lost this ability to make even these tiny little degrees of, adjudications of nuance in our thinking anymore. And it's been very frustrating.
Why do you think that's happened, that change?
I think the seed for it was obviously 9/11, and I don't diminish that attack. But the reason why it has persisted is because there's been an absence of presidential leadership. We have now spent, between Iraq and Afghanistan, the United States has spent, the estimates are fairly widely ranging, but $5 to $7 trillion between these two wars. If in the United States, if you look at the Counterterrorism Center statistics that were released just a few months ago, as an American citizen, you are more likely to be crushed to death by your own furniture in this country than you are to be killed in an act of terror. But you don't see us going to war against, those brackets that mount your TVs. We have, in certain parts of our existence and in life here, we still live with a certain amount of risk. So every day we get on the highways and we recognize that people are going to die. In fact, 60,000 Americans a year die on the highways. 30,000 Americans die every year from gun violence. We're able to kind of make these decisions because, we've made this social contract, but also because we have leadership and who's willing to fight for it or not. On this particular matter, the reason why our Iraqi colleagues are still flapping in the wind, and also why Afghans who have worked for the United States are about to be abandoned too, is because Barack Obama doesn't see any political gain in protecting these people. And he knows that the American public is not going to pour out into the streets demanding that we bring in Iraqi and Afghans. He knows that the Democrats in the House and Senate aren't going to beat up on their own guy in the White House. And to be very honest, the Republicans aren't clamoring to bring in a bunch of Muslims or Iraqis into the United States. And so this really then places it squarely on the shoulders of moral leadership, which is what we ask from our president. But in his silence, Obama has never uttered a syllable about this since he's been elected. He's basically delegating these tough moral calculations to a bunch of bureaucrats at the State Department and Homeland Security. And in their thinking, why on earth would any of them act with urgency? They're not going to get a promotion by bringing a bunch of Muslims into the country. And I'm sorry to speak so frankly, but the reason why is something that is so screamingly obvious to everybody that spends 2 minutes looking at this issue. The reason why that it persists like this, why it drags on year after year, is because we have a silent president. And Bush was silent, and Obama is just as silent as Bush was.
Let's do one story here on what silence can beget. There's a story near the end of your book about a guy named Omar, who was, like many Iraqis, helpful and trying to get out. What happened to him?
6 months before the formal end to the Iraq War, Omar applied for a visa to come to America. He was just a simple forklift operator at an army base in the north of Iraq. At the same time that he applied, I had one of my final meetings with the National Security Council, one of the final meetings that I was welcome to, at which we were told, you know, Kirk, we understand that the Iraqis on your list have a subjective fear for their lives, but there's no objective reason for them to be afraid anymore. And so the White House basically told my organization to pass along the message to the thousands of Iraqis who are trying to get out that they should just stop worrying, that things are going to be fine. Omar applied. About 8 weeks passed and he didn't hear anything. And so he sent an email asking for a progress report on his application. And what readers can see if they look at the book, I basically step out of the way and I just reproduce the email exchange over the course of 12 months between Omar, who was getting increasingly desperate. He had been identified by militia. He was receiving death threats, which he was scanning and sending to the State Department, begging them for help. And yet every time that he wrote to them, he would get an auto reply or he would get an email asking him to provide the information that he had just provided them. Last summer, he received a phone call. He was just finishing up dinner with his wife and 5-year-old son. He told her that he needed to step out, but that he would be back later. And his decapitated body was found a few blocks over later that evening. At the funeral, his brother received a death threat. And when his wife and son returned home to their house, they found a death threat saying that if they didn't leave, that they would either be killed or his son would be kidnapped. And when his brother wrote to the State Department and said, because you guys delayed so long, because you took so long, my brother has now been killed, he received an auto reply. And so that's really, you know, people can sit here and listen and debate me whether or not like I'm making a generalization or if I'm just describing something unkindly or what. All I wanted to do was to just show people what it's actually like when you sit down and ask the United States of America for help after you've served it for years. And it's a pretty ugly sight. And Omar's story is not isolated, it's continuing. I'm still getting emails from other Iraqis who have just recently received death threats or who have recently survived attempted assassinations.
Well, thus the title of your book, To Be a Friend is Fatal. That's not a line you made up. That comes from a guy I've had the interesting experience of interviewing once upon a time. Tell us who made up that quote.
That comes from something that Henry Kissinger said in 1975 as South Vietnam was being overrun. And you know, every American, I don't know if they show this in the Canadian high school textbooks, but every American learns about the Saigon rooftop scene and about how in the final moments in April '75, we basically told the Vietnamese working for us that if you can climb over the walls of the embassy, if you can get on to one of these few helicopters, we'll help you. As this was happening, Henry Kissinger told a friend, you know, to be an enemy of the United States is dangerous, but to be a friend is sometimes fatal. And I had never heard that quote until it was relayed to me in an email from an Iraqi who I'd worked with at USAID. And, you know, in the early years of the war, Al Jazeera used to actually run photographs and video footage of that Saigon rooftop scene. Some people think as a way to demoralize the Iraqis who were working or thinking about working for the Americans. And it kind of turns out that they were right, that we really did replay that scenario. The only reason why, or the main reason why I named the book that, though, was that everybody knows about that initial phase of abandonment, but we eventually did right by our Vietnamese friends. And over the course of the next several years, we brought roughly 1 million Vietnamese and Laotian refugees into our country. And I grew up with them as classmates. We did respond. We screwed up in the beginning, but we realized that we needed to do better by them. And I guess in saying this, I maybe still have a naive or delusional hope that we might still be able to do better as a nation.
Well, you are continuing to make efforts to get Iraqis who help the United States out of that country. TheListProject.org is where people can go for more information. We'll have some on our website as well, theagenda.tvo.org, so people can find out more. The name of the book is To Be a Friend is Fatal, The Fight to Save the Iraqis America Left Behind. Kirk W. Johnson, thank you so much for being there on the line from San Francisco for us. It's been a delight to meet you and talk to you. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Support Ontario's public television. Donate at tvo.org.